Today, I would like to briefly discuss the news that made international headlines a few weeks ago when Germany announced its decision to increase its military budget to 2% of its annual GDP, and also announced a one-time 100 billion euro plan to increase its military budget. Now, perhaps the first thing that should be noted about this is that the plan to increase Germany's military budget is, as of right now, just a proposal. It has no legally binding obligations, and various political parties within Germany are currently debating as to how exactly this money should be spent. And given that so many countries around the world have significant militaries, I feel like it would be a little bit hypocritical of me to criticize Germany for wanting to have a military. The people who criticize Germany's militarism often bring up the crimes of World War II, which I'm not going to say that it isn't a solid argument, but it's not somewhere where, frankly, I want to go right now. Instead, I would like to criticize the initial proposal for how this military budget should be spent, how these 100 billion euros should be spent to increase Germany's defense capabilities. And especially to criticize all of the international media that has been hyping this up, and everyone who has said that Germany is going to become a new military superpower as a result, that the German military will now rival Russia's military. And frankly, that is a ridiculous assertion. Of course, it goes without a doubt that if you start spending more money on your military is going to become more powerful. But the degree to which your military becomes more capable largely depends on how you spend that money. And the opportunities that you have to spend that money depend, in turn, on your domestic military industrial complex. If, like Germany, you do not have one, then your opportunities are very limited. Some people who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about tend to just compare the military budget that Russia has on paper, which I believe is around $46 billion, to the military budgets of various European countries, most notably Germany, which is now planning to have a military budget closer to $100 billion, and then use that to conclude that the militaries of the European Union of Western countries are stronger than the Russian military. But that is pea-brain level thinking. And this is where I will reiterate the point that in order to have a powerful military, you first need to have a large and domestic military industrial complex. And that is something that cannot be built overnight. It takes decades to train the specialists, to build all of the required facilities, which can then make all sorts of equipment. And we're not just talking about tanks and fighter jets, we're also talking about strategic bombers, we're talking about Navy ships, we're talking about nuclear submarines, we're talking about large ground-based radars, military satellites, drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, the list just goes on and on and on. If you cannot produce all of this locally, then you're doomed to buying ridiculously overpriced foreign equipment, which is going to be especially overpriced if you buy it from Western countries, where salaries are higher, the cost of living is very high, and as a consequence, the purchasing power is very low. If you do that, then you're going to be like Saudi Arabia, which until recently had an annual military budget of around 70 billion US dollars, which, by the way, was around 1.5 times higher than Russia's military budget at the time. Yet the Saudi military proved itself completely ineffective in dealing with the rebels in Yemen. All of those shiny new American F-15s, which were tailor-made for Saudi Arabia, all of those American drones, air defenses, all of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, M1A2 Abrams, all of them proved ineffective. And not because all of that equipment is of bad quality either, but rather because a modern military isn't just random bits of equipment that you purchase from other countries. It is a whole arsenal of weapon systems that are supposed to work together. And to build that whole arsenal of weapon systems, to not be privy to international pressure from the countries that you purchased your previous equipment from. You need to produce all of that equipment yourself. So make no mistake, spending 80 billion euros a year or 100 billion euros or 200 billion euros isn't going to make Germany a military superpower. Of course, it will still increase Germany's military capabilities overall, especially if that money is spent wisely. But it's not going to make the German military more powerful than the Russian military, or probably even the French military or the British military. If only because those countries have fully fledged nuclear triads, and I don't think that anybody wants to arm Germany with nukes. And furthermore, the problem arises with exactly how it's going to make the German military more capable. Let's be honest. The only thing that this proposed military spending is good for is to fight a hot war with Russia. If the German military ever decides to oppose the Russian military, as in directly fight Russia in a hot war, without the direct support of the United States, even if other EU countries are backing Germany at that point, Germany would still not be able to take on the Russian military. And it wouldn't matter how many F-35s Germany has, it wouldn't matter how many Iron Dome missile defense systems or Patriot SAMs it has. None of that would counter the fact that Russia is A, a nuclear power, and B, has lots of cruise missiles and hypersonic glide vehicles which can destroy all of Germany's military infrastructure, including its F-35s while they are still on the ground. So the only thing that this envisioned German military would be useful for is to help America fight against Russia in a hot war in Europe. And that just means that the money of German taxpayers would go towards funding America's national interests. So it seems to me that this plan is just disastrous. It aims towards making Germany a complete vassal of the United States, more so than it already is. It seeks complete dependency on the Bundeswehr towards the United States military-industrial complex. And it relies on buying equipment which will always be overpriced. Even if the United States can produce that same equipment at acceptable prices, that equipment will still be overpriced because it's being sold as exports. But with that said, I would like to reiterate that I am not trying to be hypocritical here. It is understandable that Germany might want to protect itself from potential threats. And here I would make a crucial point. It is stupid to view Russia as the only potential military threat for Germany. Geopolitics is a dirty, dirty business. Nobody knows what happens 10 or 20 years down the line. Right now we have NATO, we have the European Union, and for the time being, Germany might feel safe under their collective military umbrella, but in 10 or 20 years, many more potential threats can arise. Sooner or later, we might see a situation where Turkey becomes a military adversary for Germany. Even countries like France or Poland could potentially become military adversaries, or the United Kingdom for that matter. And a wise statesman would always keep this in mind. A wise government would never dump all of its resources towards one threat that appears to be imminent at this exact moment. A wise government will always look towards the future and will try to prepare ahead of time for any adverse scenarios that might occur in the future. So with that in mind, in my unprofessional opinion, in my armchair opinion, a much wiser way to expand Germany's military would be to take an example from another very notable NATO member state, and that member state is Turkey. Now, up until recently, Turkey's military budget has only been around $22 billion a year. Right now it's even lower than that, but that's just a consequence of how it's all counted because of the inflation of the lira. In any case, Turkey is a country with a significantly smaller economy and a significantly smaller industrial base than Germany. And yet, even so, Turkey was able to gain international renown and recognition for its world-class drone program, and what I am sure will be remembered as the legendary TB2 Bayraktar UAV. which, by the way, is nowhere near the pinnacle of Turkey's drone program. Right now, Turkey is producing a lot heavier drones, which have much more impressive technical specifications, such as the Anka heavy UAV, the Akinci, I hope I'm pronouncing that right by the way, also heavy UAV, as well as many other UAVs which are in the development stage. Not to mention Turkey's domestic cruise missile program, their shipbuilding program. They are on the verge of commissioning a landing helicopter dock into their navy, which is basically a miniature aircraft carrier. The Altai main battle tank, which has seen quite a few delays but sooner or later will enter into service, as well as many other weapon systems, which are all in various stages of development. Now, of course, the necessary military-industrial complex to produce all of this wasn't developed overnight. A military industry is something that takes decades and enormous financial resources to create. And a country like Turkey simply doesn't have, and most likely never will have, the necessary size of the economy to produce all kinds of equipment. That's why they have to purchase fighter jets from other countries. That's why they have to purchase ground-based air defense systems from others. But as they do so, they try to not overly rely on a single exporter. Other countries like India, for example, might also have this policy where exported equipment like fighter jets must be produced within the country by license. And what this kind of military import policy does is reduce your dependency, specifically your political dependency, on one particular exporter. This is why the United States cannot, for example, prohibit the export of spare parts to Turkey and therefore crash Turkey's entire military. In that case, Turkey would just turn to other exporters, which is exactly what it has done with Russia. And where it is possible, Turkey actively tries to produce all of the equipment locally. It tries to produce it in its own factories, preferably using its own indigenous components. And as a result, when it is possible, where it is applicable, where Turkey doesn't have to rely on foreign exporters, Turkey is able to produce large numbers of equipment at very cheap prices. And as a consequence of that, Turkey's international renown and the level of respect that is given to its military grows much higher than for countries that have simply purchased all of their equipment at exorbitant prices from overseas. Therefore, I believe that the wise thing for Germany to do in a situation like this would be to take a lesson from Turkey's masterclass. Is Germany going to do something like that? Or will it forever follow the United States mandate, even if it brings it closer to a hot war with Russia? That, of course, remains to be seen. It should be noted that there are political consequences of creating your own military-industrial complex. And that is that the more independent from the United States military-industrial complex you try to become, the more US politicians will be annoyed at you. Specifically in the case of Turkey and Turkey's decision to purchase S-400s, they were pissed. US politicians got pissed at Turkey for following Turkish national interests. Now, on the other hand, the rest of the world, I think, gained quite a little bit of respect for Turkey in that, since Turkey proved that it is not simply a vassal of some other country. It is an independent country which has its own national interests, and that it is able to pursue those national interests. And sadly, in recent years, Germany has just never shown that it is willing to do the same, which is why personally, I doubt that this is what Germany is going to do here. So personally, I hope that this is what happens, but I am by no means counting on it. And that is all that I wanted to say on this topic for now. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, it helps the algorithm. And also, please be sure to check out my channels on Telegram and on Rumble. The links to both will be in the video description.